Hello everyone. Today I'll be presenting a country analysis of New Zealand using McCann's framework within the context of international political economy. When people think of New Zealand, they often think of beautiful landscapes, tourism, and agriculture. However, from an international political economy perspective, New Zealand is much more than that. It is a highly developed economy with strong institutions, extensive trade relationship, and a significant role within the Asia-Pacific region. Throughout this presentation, I will analyze how New Zealand's political institutions, economic structure, globalization, and international relationships has shaped its development and position within the global economy. So before examining New Zealand itself, it is important to understand the framework being used. McCann first suggests that we should look beyond simple economic statistics and instead focus on how institutions, globalization, and power dynamics interact to shape a country's development. The first element is institutions. These include political systems, laws, and governance structures that influence economic decision making. The second element is globalization, which refers to how countries become interconnected through trade, investment, technology, and international cooperation. The third element is power dynamics. This involves the relationship between governments, businesses, and international actors that influence economic opportunities and constraints. Using these three areas allows us to understand not only where New Zealand is today, but also why it has developed in this particular way. To understand New Zealand's current position, we need to look at its historical development. One of the most important significant events that was the signing of the Treaty of Waitangi in 1840. This agreement established the foundation of governance and continues to influence political and social discussions today. Another important milestone occurred in 1907 when New Zealand became a dominion within the British Empire, giving it greater autonomy while maintaining close ties with Britain. A major turning point came in 1984 with the introduction of the Rogernomics reforms. These reforms reduced government intervention, promoted privatization, and opened New Zealand's economy to international competition. Since then, New Zealand has increasingly integrated into the global economy through trade agreements and stronger relationship with countries throughout the Asia-Pacific region. These historical developments transformed New Zealand from a relatively isolated agricultural economy into one of the world's most globally connected economies. Now, one of the New Zealand's greatest strengths is its political system. The country operates under a parliamentary democracy and uses a mixed member proportional electoral system. This system encourages presentation from multiple political parties and contributes to political stability. New Zealand is also widely recognized for its strong governance standards. It consistently reforms well in areas such as transparency, accountability, and the rule of law. Low levels of corruption create trust among citizens, businesses, and international investors. From McCann's perspective, strong institutions are essential because they create a stable environment where economic activity can flourish. Businesses are more willing to invest when policies are predictable and governance is effective. As a result, political stability has become one of New Zealand's key competitive advantages. Okay, so now I would like to discuss globalization and how it has influenced New Zealand's economic development. Although New Zealand is geographically isolated, it is one of the most globally connected economies in the world. Over the past few decades, the country has actively embraced globalization through trade liberalization, foreign investment, technological advancement, and participation in international organizations. A major turning point occurred during the economic reforms of the 1980s when New Zealand shifted from a relatively protected economy to a more open and market-oriented system. These reforms increased competition and encouraged stronger engagement with international markets. Today, New Zealand is a member of several important international organizations, including the World Trade Organization, the OECD, APEC, and the CPTPP. These memberships help facilitate trade, investment, and international operation. Globalization has created significant benefits for New Zealand. It has expanded opportunities, attracted foreign investment, and provided access to larger markets and new technologies. However, globalization also brings challenges because New Zealand is highly connected to the global economy. It is more vulnerable to international economic shocks, supply chain disruptions, and changes in global demand. From McCann's perspective, globalization is not simply about trade, it is about how countries become increasingly interconnected and how those connections create both opportunities and risks. New Zealand is an excellent example of a country that has benefited greatly from globalization while also needing to manage its associated challenges. This globalization integration is especially important because most of New Zealand's economic relationships are concentrated within one of the world's most dynamic regions, the Asia Pacific region. Now, moving on to the state market relations, another important aspect of international political economic is understanding the relationship between the state and the market itself. New Zealand provides an interesting example because of the economic reforms introduced during the 1980s. Before these reforms, the government played a larger role in controlling economic activity. However, the Rosenomics reforms encouraged deregulation, privatization, and greater competition. Although New Zealand adopted a more market-oriented system, the government continues to play an important role in supporting key industries, infrastructure, education, and innovation. Rather than choosing between government or markets, New Zealand demonstrates how both can work together. The market drives efficiency and competition, while government institutions provide stability and long-term planning. This balance has helped create a resilient and adaptable economy. Now, looking at the economy itself, New Zealand is considered a high income developed nation. One of the most notable features of its economy is the dominance of the services sector, which contributes around 70% of GDP. Industries such as finance, tourism, education, and professional services provide significant employment and economic value. Agriculture also remains extremely important. New Zealand is internationally known for dairy products, meat exports, and agricultural innovation. What is interesting about New Zealand is that it has successfully combined traditional industries with modern service-based activities. This diversification helps strengthen economic resilience and allows the country to compete effectively in global markets. So now let's move on to the economic trends. In recent years, New Zealand's economy has faced both opportunities and challenges. Following the COVID-19 pandemic, the country experienced a relatively strong recovery. Consumer spending increased, international travel gradually resumed, and key industries continued to perform well. However, New Zealand has also experienced inflammatory pressures. Rising global energy prices, supply chain disruptions, and increased living costs contributed to higher inflation rates. To address this issue, the Reserve Bank of New Zealand increased interest rates in an effort to control inflation and maintain economic stability. Another challenge has been productivity growth. While the economy remains stable, the productivity improvements have been slower than policymakers would like. From an international political economy perspective, these trends highlight how domestic economic outcomes are increasingly influenced by global events. What happens in international markets can have direct effects on employment, inflation, and economic growth within New Zealand. Now, let's talk about the trade patterns and investment flows. Trade is one of the most important drivers of New Zealand's economy. Because the domestic market is relatively small, the country relies heavily on international trade to support growth and employment. Dairy products, meat, forestry products, and agricultural goods remain major exports. China and Australia are among New Zealand's most significant trading partners, while relationships with other countries across Asia, Europe, and North America continue to grow. Foreign direct investment also plays an important role by bringing capital, technology, and expertise into the economy. At the same time, dependence on a limited number of export markets creates risk as well. If demand falls or political tensions emerge, New Zealand's economy can be affected. This demonstrates both the benefits and the vulnerabilities associated with globalization. So now, this slide focuses on New Zealand's position within the Asia-Pacific region and why this region is so important to the country's economic success. The Asia-Pacific region contains many of the world's fastest growing economies and most important trading nations. For New Zealand, maintaining strong relationships within this region is essential for long-term growth and prosperity. Australia remains New Zealand's closest economic partner due to geographic proximity, shared history, and the long-standing Closer Economic Relations Agreement, often known as CER. China has become one of the New Zealand's most important export markets, particularly for dairy products, meat, and agricultural goods. This relationship has contributed significantly to New Zealand's export earnings and economic growth. Other regional partners, including Japan, the United States, and the Asian countries, also play an increasingly important role through trade, investment, and economic cooperation. New Zealand actively participates in regional agreements such as CPTPP, APEC, and RCEP related initiatives, which help improve market access and strengthen economic integration. From an international political economic perspective, New Zealand's success is closely linked to its ability to maintain strong regional relationships. While these connections create opportunities for trade and investment, they also require careful management of political and economic relationships. Overall, New Zealand's position in the Asia-Pacific region demonstrates how a relatively small country can achieve influence and prosperity through regional cooperation, strategic partnerships, and active participation in international economic network. So, let's move on to the power dynamics. Although New Zealand is not considered a major global power, it is often described as a middle power. Rather than relying on military strength, New Zealand exercises influence through diplomacy, international cooperation, and participation in multilateral organizations. Its location within the Asia-Pacific region allows it to maintain relationships with both developed and emerging economies. However, power dynamics also create vulnerabilities. For example, New Zealand's economic relationship with China provides significant opportunities through trade, but it also creates dependency. If geopolitical tensions increases, New Zealand may face difficult decisions when balancing economic interest with foreign policy objectives. This illustrates how power relationships influence economic strategy in the modern global economy. Now, moving on to the strategic positioning, every country has strengths and weaknesses, and New Zealand is no exception. One of its greatest advantages is political stability. Stable institutions create confidence for business and investors. The country also possesses strong agricultural resources, fertile land, and a favorable climate, giving it a natural comparative advantage in food production. However, New Zealand faces challenges as well. Its geographic isolation increases transportation costs and dependence on international markets. The economy is highly reliant on exports, making it sensitive to fluctuation in global demand. Understanding these strengths and vulnerabilities is essential when evaluating long-term competitiveness. Now let's do the SWOT analysis. This SWOT analysis summarizes New Zealand's overall position. Its strength includes effective governance, strong institutions, and valuable natural resources. Its weaknesses include a relatively small industrial base and a dependence on exports. Opportunities exist in areas such as renewable energy, technological innovation, and trade diversification. Meanwhile, threats include geopolitical tensions, economic uncertainty, and heavy reliance on major trading partners, particularly China. Overall, the SWOT analysis suggests that New Zealand is well positioned for future growth, but continued adaptation will be necessary. Now, moving on to the current challenges of New Zealand's political status. Despite its success, New Zealand faces several important challenges. The economy remains heavily dependent on exports, making it vulnerable to changes into global demand. Housing affordability has become a significant issue, particularly in major urban areas. Another one is regional geopolitical tensions that also affect trade relationships and investment flows. In addition, productivity growth has remained relatively slow compared to some other developed economies. Addressing these challenges will be important for maintaining economic prosperity and improving living standards in the future. Now, looking ahead, New Zealand has several opportunities to strengthen its position within the global economy. One important priority is economic diversification. Expanding beyond traditional export sectors can reduce vulnerability to external shocks. Investment in renewable energy and green technologies offers another opportunity. These industries can support sustainable growth while creating new export markets. Promoting innovation and developing the digital economy can also improve productivity and competitiveness. If New Zealand continues investing in education, technology, and infrastructure, it will be well positioned to respond to future economic challenges and opportunities. Now, to conclude, New Zealand provides an excellent example of how institutions, globalizations, and power dynamics interact within the international political economy. Applying McCann's framework shows that strong political institutions, open markets, and active participation in global trade have contributed significantly to New Zealand's success. At the same time, challenges such as export dependence, productivity limitations, and geopolitical uncertainty remain important considerations. Overall, New Zealand demonstrates how a relatively small nation can achieve global competitiveness through effective governance, strategic economic policies, and strong engagement with the international economy. Thank you very much for your attention, and I